How long you been in Vancouver?
Um,
Okay, so
every
now we're live.
Huh?
Oh, we're live. It's 2 years. 2 years as of December 8th. It'll be 2 years.
You like it there?
Yeah. To my surprise, I like it a lot.
I never been supposed to go there for a conference in 2012, but I literally had unexpected major surgery, and I never made it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's nice.
Uh-huh.
Winter's mild, so that's good.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Similar to the state of Washington.
Sorry, how am I?
I said, I wonder if the winters are similar to the state of Washington.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's pretty similar because like Seattle's like 2 hours away from where I am.
Oh,
So are we not? Did you get the questions that I sent last minute?
No, I just saw them a while ago and I couldn't open them. It said I didn't have access.
Oh, okay. Let me change that. Yep, I didn't think of that. Normally I would know to do that, but today's a different day.
Yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Who are we missing? Everybody. Got my face on Facebook. I'm not seeing any messages.
I'll put it in the chat. Those are the questions now.
okay.
I'm really liking this book, so I plan to read it again. Because I'm reading this book and I'm reading How to Be Anti-Racist, and this is by far the better book. So
okay. So what is your critique? There's a number of scholars that I know that hate Kendi's book.
Really?
And they dislike it because they don't agree, and this is my criticism with them for not agreeing, that he says that Black people could be racist.
Yes, he does say
and
that.
I agree with that. I agree. Of course we can. We are part of the system.
Well, if his thing is if you hold the understanding that you make negative judgments about a group of people, of course Black people can be racist. I mean, it's obvious.
I think there should be a difference between prejudice and racist. If he's defining it like that, then there's a difference between prejudice and racist.
Well, the thing I think it's kind of like with racism, though, there's an action towards things, right, as opposed to prejudice, and so you have Black people who take actions, and he brings up several examples, like anyone who's a Trump supporter is Black, for example, including people who are high profile. They take, if a white person were doing it, you would say that's racist, and so because the act in and of itself is racist. So he doesn't hold to because I guess the line has always been this idea that Black people don't have power, which he also was like, that's not true. Black people do hold power. Exactly. People, and so therefore they can be racist, take actions that are
that I was making.
So
group of women, and they were saying, "Oh, this book ain't nothing because he's saying we racist." And we're not racist. And I'm saying we're part of a white supremacist system. Yes, we can be.
Of course.
We have power. Like.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. I think if that's people's only criticism of the book, it's not a good. It's got no meat to it. It's a weak ass criticism.
Exactly.
Welcome, Venita. It's in the chat. It's in the chat. You want me to put it on Facebook as well?
It's in the chat. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I'll put it on Facebook as well.
Yeah, put it on Facebook. Hey, Venita.
Hi, Venita.
Hi, how you doing? Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I love your lovely picture.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice.
Fun with my two little nieces.
Very sweet girls.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Here comes BJ. Kim is coming on. Welcome, BJ.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, BJ.
Hi, BJ.
Hey,
I was
BJ.
struggling getting here. I apologize for being late. I was going to be early.
Okay, so I've put the link to the questions, which were done last minute, but they're in the chat, the Zoom chat, and they're accessible. They've also been reposted on Facebook in the private group. I apologize for them being late. I've been really unwell the last few days.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So, I guess we could, it's 5 after, so we can go ahead and start.
Yeah, well.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and people may be late because every time I clicked on in the Facebook thing, it took me to the 11:17 meeting.
Yeah, it did that for me the first time too. It was weird.
Yeah.
But the second time it worked. Yeah.
Karen, are you still in Atlanta?
Oh.
Yes, I'll be here until maybe the 3rd week of January.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm enjoying my brother and his wife and kids, especially my little nieces.
Yeah.
I made cookies today.
Excellent.
Venita, I miss you. Where were you the other night?
I'm good. How are you, BJ?
Okay.
Good.
I miss you.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll do the round of introductions, and then we can get started with our discussions. It's sweet.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, I tried to do the setting up meetings and advance the recurring meeting for the rest of the session. Okay. And that may be why it got confused and was sending you back. So I think I'm going to delete those.
Okay. Welcome, Kim, and I see you have sound now. So good evening, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you're from. It's actually where I am. My name is Leonie Smith, and I am part of the Gold Black Reading Feminist Circle. And I'd like to start, and we're reading Caste, which the copy of my book is somewhere that I can't reach it, by Isabel Wilkerson, looking at chapters 19 to 22. And I'd like to start with doing a round of introductions to the members that are here tonight. We'll start with you, Michelle, and then go to Karen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Logan Michelle Odom, located in Brooklyn, New York, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Karen, and then Venita.
Hi, I'm Venita Walker, joining you from sorry about that.
It's going to be Karen. Yeah. Thank you, Venita.
Hi, I'm Karen Johnson, and I am joining you from Atlanta, Georgia, and this is my ticket.
Thank you. Venita, and then BJ.
My name is Venita. I'm joining you from...
Go ahead, Venita. You were next.
From Cromwell, Connecticut, and here's my book.
Thank you. BJ, and then Kim.
BJ Peak-Graham, and I'm joining you from Palm Beach County, Florida, where it is now 62 degrees, and people are actually walking around with puffy jackets on. Well...
Week. We're gonna go to Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Brandon, and I'm in New York. Here's my book, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, okay. And as I said, I'm Leonie Smith, and I've grabbed my copy of my book, and I'm also happy to be here. So, today we're going to take a look at chapters 19 to 22. For those members of the group that don't know, there's a version of the questions that have been posted within our Zoom chat. Does everyone have access to the questions now?
I don't know where they are. I can't find them.
Okay, so okay, are you on the phone or something so you can't?
No, I'm on my iPad.
Okay. They're also been in the Facebook group, so you could also look for it there. So what I'd like to do is to invite someone to read the first question, if they're willing. Do we have any volunteers?
I'll do it.
Thanks, BJ.
When I read this in the books, it summarizes for me what we, people invested in our own liberation.
Sorry, BJ, would you be willing to read from the top?
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought you just wanted the question. In chapter 19, Wilkerson is watching a reel of a Hitler parade. On film, as she writes, the parade attendees, they are the wives, mothers, fathers.
Has anyone else lost volume from BJ, or is it just me?
I can still hear.
Era.
Can you all hear her?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry, it
now
must
I
be
don't.
me. Okay.
She writes the parade attendees that they are the wives, mothers, fathers, children, uncles, nephews, all gathered at a ticker tape parade on a brilliant sunny day, celebrating what we know to be a horror. This kind of spectacle and that of celebrations of Black Death on warm summer days in the South, or plundering of the land of Native people, or constant humiliation of Indian people in the world's original caste system, happened because a big enough majority had been persuaded and had been open to being persuaded centuries ago or in the recent past that these groups were ordained by God as beneath them, subhuman, deserving of their fate. This level of cold-hearted built up over generations of insecurities and resentments. Evil can be easily activated in more people than we would like to believe when the right conditions congeal. Question number 1. When I read this in the books, it summarizes for me what we, people invested in our own liberation, are up against. In your reading of these words, and that the rest of this week's reading, how would you summarize where we are at, looking the nature of dominant caste system as it is expressed in the United States?
Excellent job, especially making sense of my word salad here. So I forgot a few prepositions. Yeah, so in reading that question, does anyone have any offerings?
So yeah, those words were really powerful. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And that stood out for me.
It's a little low.
And I think somewhere in the chapter, we're in those 22.
Can you increase your volume, Karen? We can hear you, but you're not quite robust
enough. You hear me
now? More volume would be great.
Oh, I have it on the highest. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a bit better with you a little bit closer, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that her words were very appropriate. And I was thinking that she perhaps was thinking about the whole rise of Trump and the re-emergence of a national white response, white nationalist, white supremacist response with the rise of Trump, and Trump really giving permission, if you will, for his base to act out, because I see him as a cult of personality for them. Mm-hmm. And that he speaks to what they're feeling, and he gives them permission to act out in violent ways. And so that's what came to me as I was reading this. Paul Mooney, the comedian Paul Mooney, wrote, and he does satire, right? Mm-hmm. And he says that Trump is an inspirational speaker for white racists, if you will, a motivational speaker. And I was saying, yes, that indeed speaks to their discontent or their feelings to act out and rise up. And so anyway, I've always compared Trump to Hitler, and because he is operating basically on Hitler's playbook and other authoritarian dictators.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Karen is saying, that he's also a money maker for white racism. And, you know, I listen to the MSNBC and CNN a lot. And if you listen to their words, they have been anti-Trump, you know, pretty much all along. But it's interesting to me to watch in this window that we have between Election Day and Inauguration Day, how they're really not making the shift to the president-elect. And still very much of their time and energy and focus and conversation and obsession is with this lunatic. And, you know, so I have to ask myself, what's that about?
Thanks, Michelle. Anyone else? Or anything else from chapter 19? Okay, we can move on then. I'll read the next one.
Well, I would just add to this question in terms of where we're at. You know, and I think we've talked about this before, but it bears reiterating. The numbers in the election are fairly close. You know, fairly close. There's still 70, almost 74 million people that voted for Trump. I think Biden's about 80. And, you know, even though it seems clear to me, not being a psychiatrist, it seems clear to me that Donald Trump is a lunatic. And so, oh, Nicole is here. And so, you know, it was really kind of helping me reading these chapters, put words to what we're seeing, because it's not just Donald's lunacy. You know, it is a mass psychology going on here. That's, you know, pretty ugly to look at.
I want to add, and Michelle has made a very important connection, I think, between what Karen's commentary and this whole notion of whether or not hatred, racial hatred, caste, hatred within a caste system, the urge to be a better than others, that leads to hatred. And I was thinking that most of us have known people who are less wise, less knowledgeable, less of those characteristics that we would conjure up, which are illegitimate in evaluating people, who have treated us as though they had the betters. In Tanzania and some other place I went, I picked up that word, the betters. Rwanda is the first time I heard people actually say that out loud. And this whole notion of humanity, that we talk about humanity, does her narrative here expose us to the fragility of humanity when we, it's almost like we're wax people, and if we get too close to the fire, we become something else. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, in those crowds of people, I happened to be sitting outside in the 61-degree weather in a t-shirt, reading this chapter, and I was wondering whether or not it was the victory, the parade that made the people, or the people made the parade. I kept zooming back and forth on that thought. Does the depiction and the victory of hatred create the hatred, or does the hatred create the feeling of victory and being betters, that whatever comes with being betters? So I just wanted to raise that, because I think that we don't give enough. We do a lot of talking about love, but we don't talk about hatred. We don't talk about Donald Trump in the context of this is hate, and the people that follow him, whether it be Charlottesville or whether it be Ilhan Omar, who shouldn't be in Congress and shouldn't be in this country. The other thing that I want to point out, Michelle, is that what Donald Trump is saying and what he's doing is not new. I've been watching the documentary. I remember I'm old enough to remember how much we hated Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. But after a while, the things get a little fuzzy about why you hate him. You understand the major things, but you don't understand, you kind of lose the detail. And and Donald Trump is just Donald Trump's privilege was lifetime. Ronald Reagan's was not. And that is the only difference between the Trump administration and of course the communications, the Trump administration and the Reagan administration. Reagan was martyred. Reagan was martyred. And he had people who knew government around him. And that is why they were able to do so much more damage than Trump has been able to do. It's almost like, can I get a minute, Venita?
You got 38 seconds left of that minute.
It's almost like a child who kicks the toy across the room and it puts a dent in the wall. And the child who takes the toy goes to the wall and starts making a big hole. That is the only difference between these two administrations.
All right. Before anyone else comments, we'll see if Nicole can introduce herself. I'm not quite sure. She's having internet issues.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I've switched my internet provider back, and I still don't know why I'm having issues. This is too much. Anyway, I'm Nicole Wilson, happy to be here, joining from Houston, Texas.
Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
So we're just
welcome, Nicole. Good to see you.
We're just looking at the first question. I don't know if you have any way of being able to read it, and if you have any commentary on it, Nicole.
Leonie, would you like me to share it? I can share it and people can see it.
It's been, on the screen. I don't know if that would help Nicole. I think I'm feeling it might be harder on her internet.
Oh,
Do you have the ability to read the questions, Nicole? Can you say that? Or would you like it to be read?
Yes. I'm sorry. Can you hear me, Leonie?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Did you have anything?
Oh, okay. No, I'm just opening the questions.
Okay. All right.
Okay, let me look at it. I'll pick up shortly. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have anything either in response to what's been shared or anything new to contribute to the question? The first question. Okay. So in chapter 20, Wilkerson writes, what? Oh God. I hate when my brain doesn't work because then I just look completely. Writes about how pervasive white is right messaging, white is right messaging is for those in the dominant caste. Stepping into their perspective, such messages are an inalienable truth that feeds and sustains the power they hold. Wilkerson writes, quote, society builds a trapdoor of self-reference that without any effort on the part of people in the dominant caste unwittingly forces on them a narcissistic isolation from those assigned to lower categories. This has me thinking about how the trapdoor of self-reference is also fed to those of lower caste. What can we do as people of African heritage to supplant the constant messaging that reinforces our rank? What can we do for ourselves, but also what can we do for the wives, mothers, fathers, children, uncles, nephews in our lives to seal or shore up the trapdoor that steals our humanity and potential? So that's the little question there.
Okay, I'll go first there.
Yeah.
Good questions, Leonie. So of course, you guys have heard me say this so many times, but I like the notion of disrupting things and systems and pedagogies and curriculums and and disrupting this thing. And what that looks like is, of course, different for each of us. But I do like that those modes of resistance. I think for me personally, um, I'm just choosing to stay in community with folks. I don't need to be anybody's unicorn. I don't need anyone who is going to attempt to, regardless of what I achieve or accomplish, to separate me from my people. I don't need that. And I reject it. And I also think we are doing one of the best things that we could do to affirm our humanity and potential is coming together and reading. And this is a form of a public pedagogy, if you will. And I do appreciate that. I always say, Michelle, that, it could be my dream, but I imagine, years from now, 50, 60 years from now, someone's going to rediscover this archive, and will be written about, and we will be placed in books and somebody's research. But I think we have got to acknowledge the fact that this is a beautiful public service, and it is a beautiful kind of intimate service that we are coming together, gathering here, congregating, and talking about the good word, literature, books, and how it impacts both our public and private spheres. So I think we should carry on in that regard.
Well, thank you, Nicole. I always love to hear you say that. I share that dream. But I think also so much of what happens in childhood is so critical. And this is a society that denigrates and maligns women and motherhood and children and life. But so much of how we learn to build our self-confidence and sense of self-esteem starts when we're very, very young. And I think this is also in a society that encourages us to look elsewhere for that sense of self. And I think this goes, BJ, to what you were saying about, being wax people. I think if you don't have your own self-concept in place, then any con man, any cult leader, any wolf in the forest, takes advantage of that vulnerability. But when you build that character, then it's much harder to penetrate that fortress. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I think they were talking about white people, but I'm not sure since I had no visuals. But they were talking about how young men, particularly college age, are the suicide rate among them is just like shooting through the roof. And so there's all of this effort to try to figure out what's going on. And so they focused in on a camp-like experience. It reminded me of something that my son went through when he was young. And I can't think of the name of it, but it's like a manhood training kind of thing. But when my son did it, it was from an Afrocentric perspective. But it sounds like that same kind of thing being applied to white boys because they're in trouble too. So, I just think what happens in childhood is important beyond measure. And the fact that this is such an anti-female culture means that our children are in trouble.
Thank you, Michelle. For me, I think that one of the things that we can do is to actually prepare ourselves and also those who we have influence over to be able to respond to things like media in a way that has some kind of analysis. So people have an understanding that things that are presented are not true, or that there could be place for questioning. I just think that so much of what happens is that because there's so much reinforcement of negative stereotypes, and people are spending more and more time in front of their screens and not interacting with people in 3D, I think it's important that people are taught to kind of like question the narratives that they're presented with. Because it seems to me that like part of the kind of like anti-intellectualism that's so pervasive right now comes from the fact that people actually don't know how to think. Even if they arrive at conclusions that I don't agree with, too often people just parrot things. It's like you see the Trump supporter, or even if you see the AOC supporter, like they're quoting them directly. And there isn't a sense of like how they as people, as individuals, are interacting with the messages that they're getting. And so I think that's why you see, for example, it's so pervasive that people will like just quote Trump and won't question him. And they'll believe him even though there's no truth to anything. And it's because in order to find truth, or you have to interact with the messaging that you get. And there isn't, and it's not something that's taught. within the school system. Like, I mean, for me, the way that it shows up in, one of the ways that it shows up that's really frustrating is in the conversation about socialism. I mean, you talk to a person in the United States about socialism, 9 times out of 10, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And they speak like in terms of bullet points that come from the right, and they think that socialism is Cuba and Russia, and, not like England or France or Canada, places that, where people have good lives. So I think that's important, that people have the ability and are encouraged to at least question what it is that's presented to them.
I want to add to that before we move on. I think that one of the things is that we have to recognize that as Black people, I think many parents do, but they don't do it consciously. There's no purpose to it, that we have to give our children a language. We have to give them permission very early on that their personhood is valued. And one of the things in America that happens around most of the psychologists, and I don't know jack doodly about it, but most of the stuff that I've read indicate that most children form their character, their major characteristics and learning about themselves by the time that they are 3. But what happens between the time a baby decides that they want to stand up and 3? We're constantly in America telling children no. We're constantly putting barriers like glass tables and open cabinets and hot stoves and appliances in their way, and then we have to tell them no. And I think that we have to, from the learning that we get from this book, is to develop a language that we give our children, their ability to say, I know you think that, but I don't think that, and that's okay. So you move with what you got, and I'll move with what I got. I mean, I literally have this thing down with my grandchildren because all my grandchildren are like 8 years apart. So I kind of perfected forming them to teach them to say to the world no. Mm-hmm. The hardest part of that is teaching adults to give them permission to say no. And I explained it to my grandchildren's parents in this way. I'm teaching them everything that they need to have, not to be abused, not to be molested, not to be bullied, and not to be taken advantage of, and to stand up for themselves. Mm-hmm. Because there are some adults who will say, oh yeah, and you'll get them, my daughter, yeah, that's why they're going to get put out of school. Or because we live in a society that really doesn't, no matter what caste system, value children and their rightful place in our society. Mm-hmm. I was thinking that through this whole thing.
BJ, when you're speaking, it brings to mind the fact that, we are not white people. We have our own culture. And as long as we are trying to become something that we are not, it makes it even harder for us to let that circle be unbroken, so to speak. So when I hear you talking about your grandchildren, that's the example. That's the example of saying we are all family, and that you're not out here by yourself. You are responsible for me the same way I'm responsible for you, and that we become stronger together, as opposed to each one of us thinking that we're going to attain this American ideal of being this super successful individual and not be a part of a unit or community.
Mm-hmm.
So I love just hearing you, talking about how to raise grandchildren or children for that matter, because I really think that building up Black families, and I know some of us are just very, very fragmented. I know my family has a lot of fragmentation, but where there is somebody who can meet you halfway in building for the next generation and the generation after that, I seek out those people and make myself available to them, because there are people who are older than I am who are doing the same thing for me. So I think family and community is key for us, and some of the individuality may not always be the best thing for us in all situations.
And that's what she was getting to, Kim, on the issue of collective narcissism. I think, but then I was thinking also, Venita, I know. And then I was thinking also, I'm gonna get this out real quick. I was thinking, but we had to have a scholar write a book to tell us to stop beating our children.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And she's been consistent too, BJ. Like you're talking about Stacey Patton, right?
Pardon me?
About
Yes.
Stacey Patton, yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, she is consistent. I love the work she's doing, but I do think, unfortunately, this is, how it happens a lot of times. This social conditioning, it is difficult to sometimes recognize and permeate that the social conditioning. And so it takes, because before writing the book, I'm thinking back to what she was doing, using, mobilizing her social media accounts and her lectures. And so, I mean, just resisting and challenging and disrupting these notions and really not giving a damn. Just like, I'm going to say this, and I think like the work you're doing. And I think that the mediums, a lot of times we're looking at, kind of what can be done in mass. And sometimes I'm thinking now about Adrienne Marie Brown, which she talks about the micro activism. I mean, it's still useful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Rites of Passage is the name I couldn't think of before, but Kim's comment reminded me that that's what it was called, the Rites of Passage program. But yeah, all of that kind of stuff.
Ray Wimbush in his manhood training.
Manhood training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff that we do from a cultural perspective, I think is really important. We were very diligent in my family when my son was growing up. We celebrated Kwanzaa. And I just think that's a great, great concept. And, I hate that it's gotten so intertwined with personalities and whatnot, but just the concept itself. And so, I don't think it's ever really caught on as a mainstream thing within the Black community. But the idea that we have the power, we have self-determination, we have the capacity to create our own rituals, our own sort of world within a world, because we are surrounded, we are surrounded by stuff here.
But the question is so key, Leonie, that you ask, and that is like, we've been talking about family, but once we're able to claim community as family again, and the actual lancing of our community came at the time of desegregation. And most people think of desegregation as only happening in the South. But I rode the buses from Boston, Roxbury to South Boston, where Irish Catholics, in the name of the church, were throwing rocks and bottles at kindergartners, first and second graders. So I think that the desegregation, in the sense of, maybe people want to call it gentrification, because people in New York and Boston and Augusta don't want to admit there was segregation. It's all right by me. If you want to deter the truthiness of history. But I think when our community was lanced, we had a better chance. Before our community was lanced, we had a better chance at doing what Kim has described. I'm a huge fan, Michelle, of Kwanzaa. I don't care who made it up. I love it. I've been doing it for over 30 years, and I will continue to do it. And it fills my soul. Mm-hmm. And I think that, when I was in the Black Panther Party for about 4 years, and when we did breakfast, the breakfast program in Boston, it is something that I think people have lost, and they don't know how to reclaim it, because in addition to desegregation, we also experience gentrification and urban removal of in the major cities: Chicago, Los Angeles, Portland, San Antonio, New York City. So I think it's real. We used to have a Civics Academy. Ayanna Presley, who is the representative, she was one of my first students in my Civics Academy. It was a street academy. We just went in front of the Boys Girls Club, and when they came out, we grabbed them and said, "Look, we're taking you for an hour." So, so I think that if we take what Wilkerson is teaching her, and I'm telling you, I have cried over this book so much, even more than her other book. I do cry over books, but we have the notion of Sankofa, to reach back and claim what we have lost. Mm-hmm. That is our only salvation. Mm-hmm. Michelle,
I agree.
Yeah. Otherwise,
I agree. I'm thinking about when Matthew, what was this? The
Matthew
guy,
Solar
Matthew Johnson. He used to make fun of the concept of Sankofa. He just really didn't get it, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is what I think people don't recognize. So much goes into it. Reparations. That's claiming the loss of the past. That's claiming the debts. That's picking up the receipts, and that's all. And it's not all in the past, but it's bringing it, So I'm sorry, Leonie, I could go on and on.
Understanding that our history, does not begin on these shores.
Yes.
You know, it's just a really important thing to know about yourself.
Yeah.
All right, Venita, we see you rolling your eyes.
She ain't hit the button. That's because you're talking to Michelle.
She's being quiet, but she got body language going on that's ugly.
I wanted Venita so bad Thanksgiving night because I had to call you, Michelle, and say, get Venita.
All right.
When you talk about the civics lessons, it just seems like there's this opportunity in COVID and the fact that so many people are in the Zoom world, and that a lot of kids don't have company, they don't have a network. And it might be something that we could build the network, and underneath it is an agenda that we're marching kids towards more, I guess, community building. So even though they're having fun and having a good time, it's still with this lens of how do you become who you are, as opposed to who this country is telling you to become because they want you to be this little capitalist. Mm-hmm. So I just think that it might be this wonderful opportunity to have some free Zooms out there for whoever can come. I don't know, it just sounds like a wonderful, wonderful time to just look at how we can use this time of isolation to build our nation. Mm-hmm. Well, not our nation, but you know what I'm saying.
But when you start talking about it, and I know this is not the time to talk through this, and maybe I should invite everybody to talk about the solutions to this, because I've been proposing this for over four or 5 years now, that we need to have a history channel. We need to have all the senior government, Black senior government people, all the African American studies people. And I have been offering to various people, I got 14 nights that you can have. Oh no, 13 nights, because I have to have one. But one night you could have history. The next night you could have civics. The next night you can talk about African history. Yeah, so, but everybody wants to be a star. And that's out of our oppression too. I'm sorry, Leonie.
No, I'm appreciating the discussion, but I'd like to get us, I want some concept of the time. And so I'd like to invite someone else to maybe pick one of the other questions that are up. Take the lead and read it, and we can continue our discussion.
I'll do 3. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll do 3. And everyone in the cast, I'll just read the quote. Everyone in the cast is trained to COVID proximity to the dominant caste. In what ways do you witness this behavior in your own family, folklore, and that of culture? Specifically curious about the tendency of claiming Native American blood and other experiences of what may look like pride, but can feel like distancing. Wilkerson's quote heavily quotes Eric Fromm, who writes in part, of those in the dominant caste, he is nothing. But if he can identify with his nation or can transfer his personal narcissism to nation, then he is everything. And underneath may lie in the fear that he cannot live to the constructed idea of his own perfection. The survival of the group depends to some extent on the fact that that its members consider its importance as greater than that of our own lives. And furthermore, they believe in the righteousness or even superiority of their group as compared to others. And as Takamichi Sorori writes, group narcissism leads people to fascism. I'm just going to take that last sentence. Group narcissism leads to fascism. And in that quote, in those quotes that you just pulled out, like Fromm wrote the greater of the follower, I circled that and I said that was very important. And it definitely made me think of Donald Trump, because again, I see him as a cult of personality individual, and that he has conjured up in his base a certain class. Hello, are you all there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought everybody was frozen. I feel that he had conjured up in his base this, particularly the poor whites in the rural parts of America, that he becomes their cult personality leader, their hero. That speaks to issues of racism and white supremacy. And that for them, particularly in this chapter, where she talks about, I may be poor or whatever and disenfranchised, but one thing I'm not is I'm not Black. And you speak to that I'm feeling. And it also made me think about a few weeks ago when we read Jonathan, where Wilkerson talks about Jonathan Linsall piece about the white taxi driver in Tennessee, where he said that he doesn't want to pay the government to get the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, that he'd rather die than to have Mexicans and welfare queen. And we all know those are dog whistle words, to get the health care, but he'd rather die. And we see that history. It's like, what is wrong with you people? What is wrong? And it's only because they buy into the fact that whiteness is their salvation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. What that brings up for me on that piece is that, actually what's coming up for me is that I see an error in putting a lot of emphasis on Donald Trump right now. I think it's really important to recognize the thread, because that welfare queen thing was a strategic invention of the Reagan campaign, who's seen as, kinder. And he created that. And what I see happening is that for me, the racist messaging is the same. It's just gotten less and less. It's just gotten more not fibrous. What's the word? More lacy. Like, it's got more holes in it, because now you used to have just in my lifetime. So like Reagan would be like probably the first president that I would remember as in had enough like awareness in terms of age. I don't really remember anyone before than what was happening in the 70s, but I could certainly say that of Reagan, he took this idea of pitting, he really created this idea of working class meaning white people who are working. That's because working class is not, of course, it does not apply to Black people or brown people. It's for white people. That's what that label is for. And pitting the white working class up against the invented, because we know it wasn't real, welfare queen. And so you had these ideas that they set up this false dichotomy and for a political argument. And now, because of, I don't know, what's happening now with Trump is that it's just been a watered down idea. He didn't even have anything as robust as that type of racism. He just says, make America great. That's all he had to say. He literally has nothing to back it up, right?
Leonie, that was Ronald Reagan's campaign slogan, make America great again. That
Yes.
was Reagan.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is that at least with Reagan, not that it was better, but like he attached it to an idea of something. It was a false thing that he made up for political gain and because he was racist, as was the case. But that the thing that I find dangerous is that you can take those same old tropes and actually take away, even make it even less robust, and still find yourself on the winning end politically. Like Donald Trump didn't even have to come up with anything like welfare queen versus white working class, or the what was his name, the Willie Horton thing. Like they created all of these things that were like, you know, evil but politically genius. And Trump and America and racism has gotten is so much more overt now in the United States over the last 2-3 decades that you don't even have to you don't have to put in that much work to wake up the racism of white people now. This is the thing that concerns me, because there is you're not even arguing with an idea. Mm-hmm. You're only arguing with identity. It feels like there's no, so which means like you can't go back with, like, you know, we can sit back and look at the idea of welfare queen, and we have the stats now to say that like that's not like a thing or whatever. But how are you going to argue with make America great again? How are you going to argue with that? Because there's no intellectual thing that you can actually hold on to. It's just identity. It's just identifying as the dominant caste. It's just white supremacy. So for me, that's a much more dangerous place to be in. And this is why I dislike the conversation of giving Donald Trump so much power, because Donald Trump is the latest iteration of what has been present during the entire history of the United States.
I just like giving him so much power too, Leonie, but you know, he is probably the boogeyman that is going to be with us for several years hence. And regardless of how illogical it is, he's providing fuel, he's providing meat to this mass mania, you know. So I think to some extent we still have to try to figure it out, that the analysis of him leads us to understanding them. Yeah.
I think the whole
and there's a way that even with the, well, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, thank you. I think this whole concept of white has just been such a perfect storm. So because they had bullets, they could come into African nations and kidnap so many people because they had guns. And it was the same thing for America, that it was all about the fact that everything lined up perfectly for whiteness at a certain point, so that you all of a sudden you have the labor to build your nation, and you also have the bullets to kill people who were already here. And so this concept of white just kept growing and growing and growing, and more people wanted to get closer and closer to it. So it became like this living thing. And so when you start looking at demographics for this country, and maybe even 20 years back, they started talking about the browning of America, and how in no time at all, I think it's 2030 maybe, I don't know the exact year, but America will be darker. More people in this country will be browner than ever before, and white won't be the majority. So given the fact that white is no longer the majority, it creates this frenzy that Trump takes advantage of, because now all of a sudden you have a difference in the white people from the Reagan years and the white people now. Because now he's saying to them, and the method that he's using is that all these Mexicans and Haitians and all these people are going to come in and take your space. So he does have, in my mind, some level of creativity with stirring the fear pot. So just for me, I just think that each one of them takes advantage of this level of how do I keep the fear and the narcissism of being white at center. And I love this chapter because it talks about, and like Karen was saying earlier, we will die for the ability to remain white. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And I think that that's why you see people at rallies without masks, and you hear that they're coming down and being infected. And you also see that when Trump says, I didn't tell you all about COVID because I didn't want to panic you, that nobody has him arrested. So that there is something a little different and more sinister to where we are right now. But I also appreciate, Leonie, that maybe we don't need to say his name as much because this is bigger than him.
Yeah, and I think too, Kim, Reagan was a reaction. He was a reaction to the 60s and 70s. And, he was the manifestation of white folks who were never down with that shit. He came to town to let us know we ain't down with it.
Right.
Remember Bakke and the whole anti-affirmative action and all that stuff that was going on then in the 80s.
But wasn't Trump also a reaction? He was a reaction to we ain't down with no black president. I don't care what they say, what he did.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's a continuation of the same thread. That there was a period where they kind of went underground, and while they're underground, this is when ALEC comes on the scene, and they are quietly working in the background, modeling legislation, state by state. Mm-hmm. So all of this stuff was going on in the background, and on the surface, it looked like, maybe we had settled into a kind of, ability to live together. And then Obama was elected, and, that just took people into the whole post-racial madness. And so then Trump comes along to say, we don't have to be underground anymore. We have all of our ducks lined up in a row, and we are ready for all-out war.
I want to pick up where.
Sorry, I just want to pause because I know Nicole actually was meant to speak after Kim.
Oh, okay.
I just want to check, and then we can come back to you, Karen.
Oh. Sorry, Nicole.
Oh, okay. No problem. No, I was just going to say, Michelle kind of mentioned it. I was thinking through the anti-affirmative action discourses and the irony of course, we all know the colonizer, saying somebody's taking something from me. But also, Michelle, I like what you're saying about the way in which, this movement, this racist, white supremacist, white hetero patriarchy movement had gone underground. And I think it is important for us to also acknowledge the role of technology. Donald Trump is weaponizing. He utilizes technology. It is like a person, a hive. These people are just, a demigod. They're just waiting to hear what he has to say, whatever lies he's going to spew. Hell, you have Sean Hannity, who just admitted he doesn't even vet the information. Like, where are we really? When you have someone admitting the things that he's allowed to communicate to folks, They're not even vetted. There's no research. You're just spewing hatred. And unfortunately, it's what our ancestors have long known, that white freedom and the ways in which they control their economic anxieties and the other kind of social political anxieties, our bodies will be utilized. There's a price that we have to pay, right? And so as long as we are captive, then they understand that they're free. And again, and this is why we keep existing in this joy pain continuum. Okay, I'm sorry, Professor Karen.
Oh no, I was listening to what you were saying. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I agree with everything that you all were saying, and I like how Michelle picked up on Ronald Reagan and making the connection because because when you look at the 50s and 60s and 70s, our people, Black people, were engaged in the fight for civil rights, and then you had the emergence of the women's rights movement and also the indigenous peoples movements, where people were fighting for social justice, fighting for voting rights, fighting for access to public schools, schools that would allow for that. And so you had these gangs, and then also worldwide, you had the movement of formerly colonized nations fighting to overthrow the chains of European colonization. And so I think that, when you mentioned Reagan, that made me think that, yes, he becomes the response to we're moving back in time, that we're not going to allow. Because when you look at the gains of the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, you see important gains being taken place. You see, even in the field of education, the gaps, the so-called learning gaps being closed, access, etc. And then you see the emergence of, but at the same time, you do see in the South, whites pulling their kids out of public schools and Milton Friedman coming into existence, talking about neoliberalism. And you see the emergence of that. So it is important to make those connections because Ronald Reagan was problematic. He did come and change stuff on a political level, as well as in schools, and how he was talking about schooling and how the emergence of neoliberalism. And the thing that is problematic is that Obama, who was a centrist in his politics, also looked up and favorably to Reagan. And Reagan was problematic in terms of stopping the progress that the people were on the ground fighting for changes in policies. Yeah. And so, and really stopping a kind of progressive left movement, right? And so, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Leonie, as well as Michelle, about Reagan, because it did make me think, oh, yes, we have to look at Reagan as being the one that started making these changes in terms of politics in our social life as well as in schools. And that only Trump doing is he's just operating on other people's playbook in terms of his dog whistle. And that he doesn't bring anything to the table, but a neo-fascist white nationalist kind of way of looking at the world and acting on it. And he's evil. Evil man. I posted on he's a neo-fascist white nationalist satanic beast.
But on top of all of that, as we talk about American political history,
right,
do not forget that the American populace had concluded that Jimmy Carter, a Southern farmer, generations of Georgia, deep in the Georgia backwoods, would carry forth the principle, and he didn't.
Okay.
Which is why he only had one term and a cow. You see, one of the things about Ronald Reagan was that he was a movie star.
Right.
He had the gift of acting. And don't forget that he had spent 2 years on US television for General Electric selling the white American ideal, which included his wife, Nancy, and his 2 children, and every kind of electric appliance available on the planet Earth, sitting in their living room, a house that General Electric bought for them because they had no money. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's with Donald Trump. Donald Trump has no money. He only has debt, assets and debt. So anyway, I think that in keeping with what Wilkerson is teaching us here is that one of the mistakes that the superior class makes all the time is depending upon everybody's with the program. Everybody is blinded by the whiteness.
But enough people are blinded, are following the program and are blinded by the whiteness. That's the thing. Because here's the thing, that while every other like developed nation, so-called first world nation, was at the time that the civil rights movement was active, which happened also to correspond, coinkydink, I don't know, with the Vietnam War. So America's like busy with all the focusing on all this like internal shit, and then they go and they have this external thing, this Vietnam War and stuff. That's when Europe and countries like Canada and a bunch of other so-called first world nations are doing things like taking on universal health care, expanding rights of individuals. This is the whole thing. And then America is like retarded and regressing as a country because of its distractions that have been possibly put in place on purpose. But, you know, the same time that the civil rights movement is like super active in the United States is the same time that like the country I live in is getting healthcare. All the countries in Europe are getting healthcare, expanding rights, having more and more people of color being coming into their country. And the United States is like on its own, not so internally focused. It's like not seeing that the whole world has moved on to other things.
Yeah, Mike Lee said it. Mike Lee just said it like 6 months ago. He said democracy is not the point. So he said it out loud.
So it feels like, because I mean, it just feels, I don't know, it just feels like.
But look who Leonie, the founding sperm donors, whatever. I hate to say the word founding fathers, but so those people they were not learned philosophers or thinkers.
I know, the teenagers. It's so ridiculous that people looking up to these people. And it's like some of them are like literally like, I don't know, like 17. It doesn't make any sense anyway.
I know.
It's just the thing that when I bring it back to like caste and stuff, it's just that yes, there are all these movements that come up, but the movements compared to what happened in other parts of the world were so stagnant in the United States. They got significantly less done in the United States than they did everywhere else in the world that was developed and moving forward, which is why many of the things that are considered basic are not present in the US, right? So.
But even in my lifetime,
the goal. I think that was the goal.
Hold on.
Biden Harris are going to bring us into the new century. That is the hope.
That what? Oh, that
Biden Harris are going to bring us into the new century.
Michelle, I could throw this cup at you.
Oh, me too, honey child. I got something to throw at Michelle myself.
Damn! What the hell are you drinking tonight?
Where'd that come from? Give us your book back. Give us your
I gotta keep hope alive. We're good, right? I gotta hope that this thing is gonna work out in Georgia.
Now you're talking about hope alive.
Why
don't you add on fire and whatever that thing was, and ready to go or ready to run or whatever. Add that. Go ahead, Michelle. Add it.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal.
I do want to add one more thing to the conversation, and this kind of relates, Leonie, to what you said earlier about technology. And just in terms of talking about a continuum, on BJ's program, a couple of weeks ago, the post-election show, one of the conversations that went on was a point made by Dr. Goddess, Dr. Kimberly Ellis.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about how the conversation really was around Ice Cube and, how he got involved in trying to negotiate with Trump on behalf of Black America. And so the conversation was kind of like, well, where did he get the audacity to think that he could speak for Black America? And so she made the point about Barack Obama being really the first Twitter president, and how he had bypassed the gatekeepers in the Black community, like the Black church, Jesse Jackson, all of that, in order to go directly to the people with Twitter. And so in a different sense, Donald Trump came along and really took what Obama had done, this is my point, and surpassed what Obama had done in really, really speaking directly and raw and straight up to his people.
Except I agree with you, Michelle, but except that Donald Trump has always had a stake in media, right? And so there was always this kind of braggadocious kind of celebrity that Donald Trump, had this kind of following and a celebrity that he always had. And so then when you have the rise of course, we look at the 90s of reality television, and he, was able to sink his teeth into that. And so I feel like there is so much more, that this figure is much more dangerous as a result of this. And there's a discourse. There is a way that he utilizes rhetoric that is absolutely, it's deadly. I don't know another word. It's deadly. We'd had of course, we were all witnessing Black Lives Matter and some of the movement for Black Lives, however you want to pronounce it or describe it. And we've seen them, doing different things to kind of wake the people up, the die-ins, the traffic, stopping traffic, and so forth. And when this man gives the call to death, it's really a call to murder. It's a call to action, but I want to call it a call to murder.
Nicole, the most recent Keith Olbermann video is talking about the long list of people who have received death threats as a result of disagreeing with Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
It's not Donald Trump personally that shows up at their house, but it's one of his crazy supporters.
His soldiers, his foot soldiers. Yes, but when we go back and we look at the ways that the Klan works, the way the Klan operates. I mean, I'm thinking of Charles Chestnut's The Marrow of Tradition. And how Chestnut so beautifully wrote how these, and again, we're right back to having a conversation about white working class men. They're his foot soldiers. They're carrying it out. And so Donald Trump, and it's not the idea he's, and here's why I find him to be so much more of a disaster, really. It's a threat, a terror. I don't know a better way to describe it, a terror, because he is anti-establishment. He is, rogue. He is a lot of what folks, certain people are, just drawn to in this political moment, right? In this political moment where we are thinking through, like, okay, do we want to keep with this kind of two-party corporate system? Because that's what it is. Or, what do we want to do? But it's not just that he's going to terrorize Black and brown. And of course, we're going to get it worse. But he exists. He's letting white men, white women know he'll terrorize and burn them at the stake as well. If they don't get in line, we are going to feel the aftershocks, you all, for years. This is not over. This is not over. Okay, Venita, I'm sorry. I'm
and not to let the program end without at least mentioning, Nicole, that right now we are hovering right up there around 270,000 dead from COVID-19, and that's not all Black folks. He's deadly on numerous fronts.
But we also have to point out that when he came into office, the wealth gap between the working class of America was 10% to 70%. Now it is 1% to 99%. Which is another kind of death.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to add that's real important is that we can't let white women off the hook.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Republican vote white supremacy, but we do not talk about that in this country. They are problematic. They uphold white supremacy, and they are problematic even when we see videos going viral. The Time magazine just the person of the year on Time magazine cover. Have you all seen that?
No.
Karen. Photo of a white woman who represents Karen. And we need to have a serious conversation, because it's not funny. It's not funny when these women benefit more than any other oppressed group from affirmative action. And what does that mean? Okay, you benefit from affirmative action, then you bring that benefit into your income, into your household, into your family, and turn around and support white supremacy. And so we don't have conversations about that, and we need to. Because we need to identify them as our enemies.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes, Venita.
None of us should be surprised at white women's behavior. If we look way back during slavery, when the white woman, now oppressed or not oppressed, there's a right and there's a wrong, would bring little girls to her husband's room to ensure she had a place to lay her head. And the reason why I say that is because old habits are hard to break. And no, I don't give them a pass. I work around them. I live around them. And some of the things I hear, and even more so their behaviors, it doesn't shock me at all. If they're not progressing themselves, then on their own. They have to progress behind their husbands. And that white picket fence and that BMW 733 IE series is very important to them. So there's nothing that, it doesn't surprise me that you had so many white women. What was it, 50, what was the percentage? 55% of them voted for Donald Trump?
Mm-hmm.
That's not surprising.
You know, I was fired from a job from a very, well, I was fired from McKinsey Company, for this statement, that white women are the most dangerous species walking the planet Earth. And that was back in 1987, 86, 87. And I have been so moved and so comforted. I would, don't get me wrong, I wasn't gonna be there more than a year and a half. I wasn't gonna last. And I knew that. So, whatever. And I think that the new Black female scholars, especially our sisters, are now, because I only had one person to talk about this issue with, and that was a Black male scholar who felt comfortable enough. But I think people are beginning to understand that, and it isn't just around 55% of the voters for 55% of white female. But I think, Karen, that people are beginning to understand that too was a theft. And Venita, that too is a debt. That white women have to be held accountable, and it has to be their name, not some Karen person.
Okay. I want us to be mindful because we're over time.
We are. Let me just tag on here to say that it's a debt, but instead of repayment, we're getting this other consequence of caste that Isabel Wilkerson is talking about, with us continuing to comfort and forgive and stroke and pamper.
Can I talk with you about this, Michelle, for a minute while we're talking about, because I'm old and I'll forget. Simone Sanders is the most recent victim. How many of you know who the Deputy Press Secretary, Senior Advisor to Mike Pence is? I read 4 newspapers every day and I didn't know. But that is what Simone Sanders is to Kamala Harris. Senior Advisor, Deputy Press, Communications Spokesperson, whatever. She brought it home for Joe Biden, but she is not his press secretary. She is not his senior advisor. All the white women are. The white women. The white women.
And some of that is because, DJ, and I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked that Sanders was not selected. There's a pairing with Kamala Harris and, a play on the notion of this Black girl magic, if you will, right? And of course you have the very, the aesthetics of Kamala Harris contrasting the aesthetics of Sanders. But Sanders initially, let's remember, she was in the Sanders camp.
Yeah.
She was what we would call that progressive.
But but Nicole, she was the first to move over when Biden won the nomination.
Exactly. And because she said, I don't think people are ready for this. And so, it was chestnut, as she said, checkers, in that we don't want this man here for another 40, which is what a lot of us progressives did. We just said, well, hell, what, we just got to go ahead and support, what Trump has been calling sleepy Joe. But we've got to support Joe. But I'm not shocked, and what we are going. And here's the deal, here, and this is why I don't play the game, and I'm not convinced when folks try to say, well, Black people, we need businesses, and I don't want to hear the Black capitalist discourse. The capitalism is not going to save us. This is not going to save us. And the ways in which, I don't care if you put Black faces in high places, that's not going to save us. President Obama was there. It's not going to save us. Mm-hmm. And we are playing, we're playing at this because, and it's so funny. And it further, shows me, as I've had multiple conversations with you all about some of my own warring, much like Audre Lorde has, been with Black, those elitist Black folks. The ways in which class and that kind of social stratification draws a wedge between us. And I watch upper middle class and middle class with these aspirations to these representational, shall I say, aspirations. I want to be the next Negro, the first Negro to do this, the first one to do that. Where it is not going to save us. And progressives, and we've been saying this, but folks don't, en masse, they don't want to embrace a socialism, a praxis. It makes me sick when I get on Twitter and I see people celebrating. Well, let's see how many people of color he puts in the cabinet. Oh, what? Ice Cube said it best. He's probably not the best reference, but the Black police shows up for the white cop. It does not matter when you're talking about the harm of the harms and the cruelties of capitalism and the ways in which folks will do the bidding. And again, what Wilkerson says about, again, to me, that just reifies those ways that we have this desire. To be close to the so-called dominant caste, to replicate their practice.
Nicole, my point about Simone Sanders, and I don't like her at all. I think she's done some very harmful things. But my point is, all the decisions around the communications people were made by white women, and probably by with Jill Biden. And they were very aware that Joe Biden could not afford politically, message-wise, to have a bald-headed Black woman, 6'8", as the press secretary.
Right, full-bodied.
Yes.
Right, fitting all the stereotypes.
So it was okay, despite the fact that Simone delivered South Carolina to Joe Biden. She was the one in the field chopping the cotton for him, bringing it home. Despite that, she has to be, because they could have found anybody, they could have found anybody, Black woman to be Kamala Harris's senior advisor, communications, blah, 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 spokesperson. And they did the same thing to Karine Jean-Pierre.
Okay, I need some mindfulness around timing because I have to go. So,
okay.
Okay.
I'll just say my goodbyes then.
Can we put a pin on that and talk about it at the end? Because it's very important to talk about this whole idea of how white women.
Okay.
All right.
I can just say,
question.
yeah, I just, if you all want to continue on the live thing, then you all continue, but I'm just going to say my goodbyes.
Oh, you're leaving now? You're not going to close?
Oh, I can close, but I'm not
Well,
sure if you guys are still doing this
You
conversation.
had people throwing cups at people. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
BJ, technically we go to 7:30, so we're already a bit late.
Hey, y'all think a whole bunch of black women gonna be talking from 6 to 7:30? Okay. Leonie, thank you.
How you guys?
We can stay. I can stay.
Yeah, you all stay.
BJ, I can stay for a few minutes. Leonie, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, Leonie.
Good night.
Good night.
What
Nicole,
happened
did
to
you say
Kim?
goodbye? Oh, Nicole is gone too. Okay.
What happened to Kim?
You had to go.
Kim left a few minutes ago.
Oh.
Yeah, we've always been pretty. That's why Venita plays the role that she plays of timekeeper, BJ, because we try to really stick pretty much to the schedule.
I understand.
Because what I'm really going
when
for,
I was teaching, I'd still be talking and people would be going out the door. Well, let me say this last thing.
I'm gonna I'll leave the live stream on for a few more minutes, but I'll cut that off in a couple of minutes. Yeah. So did you want to say something else about white women, BJ?
I think Karen is absolutely correct that I have tried using my media to have these conversations about the medicines we need to take to shore ourselves up against white women. And I think it's for us to do it. And that's why that's why I went to Black Women's Blueprint, and why it was such a disappointment. Karen, about 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I asked a group of Black women who were womanists to do a show on my channel that had to do with only Black women. Kim, good for you to come back. And we called it Black Women in the Prison. And most people will know all of my programming, it's our common ground, not common ground. It's what we have in common as a people, not all you other people. But, and it went by the wayside, and I thought it was very important to talk about how white women usurped a civil rights movement for themselves, how they behaved during suffrage and with the vote, because once they got it, they didn't care anybody else had it. And the whole psychology of white American women and their interchange on Black women's history. So I think it's so important for us to talk about that. And my fear is that we have a young generation who have no awareness of the evil that lurks around them. The level and depth of betrayal that's so possible. And I'm wondering what else will be stolen. You know, we went through a period, I don't know which generation it was, what mine, where they were stealing our men. It was trophy time for Black men. Then we went through another generation when they were throwing them back. I don't know where we are on that front now, but I think we need to look at all of that, and because they really are the thieves. You know, thieves come in different shapes and forms, and if I wanted to go steal some gas at Costco's and not pay for it, I wouldn't do it myself because they would see my white hair, my old lady came in and stole the gas. I would use somebody else. I would get in a partnership with somebody else. And that is what's going on.
Yeah, and I think in terms of where we are now, BJ, I think we're now at that point, the era of scandal, Olivia, of seeing more and more Black women voluntarily with white men. As Kim used to always say, we didn't need to do that because we had the fruit.
What Kim used to say, what?
What'd you say, Kim? Kim said we didn't need to have the experience of being with a white man because we had been raped, from day one on these shores. And so there was no allure there for us.
Yeah.
But for Black men and white women, they seem to have this built-in attraction that they needed to work through their system. And I think what we're seeing now is more Black women voluntarily being with white men. And, they may be decent white men, I don't know. But I suspect that some of what is going on there is that when people really don't have a strong command of history, then we're just doomed to do things that make no kind of sense. Mm-hmm. I was talking to one of my nephews the other day, and he was asking me if I was going to get the vaccine. And so I said to him, well, nephew, I read medical records. I don't think I'm going to be the first one online for the new vaccine. And he said, well, they talk about making it so you can't do anything. You won't be able to go to the airport. You won't be able to go to a restaurant. You won't be able to function in society if you can't prove you've had the vaccine. And I said, well, I understand all that, but I'm going to send you a link to our playlist so you can listen to some of our discussion, because I will not be the first one online. It's just so important. And we are forced to move at such a fast pace in this world that we're in, that it's hard to really take the time to get a handle on our history, to get a grasp on who we are and where we've been, so that we can do better decision making in the here and now. Mm-hmm. We're just going around in circles.
Michelle, are you still live and recording?
Yeah, I'm going to cut it off. We can stay in the studio. But thank you, everyone. We will see you next week reading our story together.